Our next reader is another co-founder of the Jasper Collective, Jessica Kashiwabara. She is a web editor at Poets and Writers and damn good at it. She's written for Spin.com, the Amsterdam News, and on mental health for the Child Mind Institute. She's the co-founder of the Jasper Collective and has read for Lost Lit and the Unpublished Reading Series. She was recently published in Volume 1 Brooklyn and is currently at work on a collection of personal essays that she started in the collective. Woo! She lives in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn with her dog, Kitty, who is also very sweet. Jessica?
The very first time that I read any personal essay was here. So, and then shortly after, we started the Jasper Collective. So this is really like full circle tonight, and it's so nice to see lovely faces out there too. So thank you all for coming. All right, so this is a work in progress, and it's probably in its 7th version already in the last 3 weeks. But I finally got it to somewhere where I'm happy to share it with you all. So it's called A Study. Wabi is not concerned with deprivation or insufficiency, but with aesthetics and blankness. The sense is somewhat like the Western notion of existential emptiness, but exclusive of Western angst and despair. Instead, the Japanese embrace emptiness as a positive characteristic. Making Waves, Japanese American Photography, 1920 to 1940, by Dennis Reed. 1. When I was 10, I overheard my mother on the phone speaking about adoption papers. My grandfather had just passed away, and she was sorting something out with his will. But all my 10-year-old mind processed was the fact that someone, maybe even I, was adopted. After she hung up the phone, I said to my mother tentatively, "I heard you say adoption on the phone," trailing off, too scared to finish the sentence, though I was sure it had to be my sister and not me who was adopted. My mother jumped in. "Oh no, it's me. I'm adopted." 2. My grandmother was my grandfather's 3rd wife and a second cousin of his 2nd wife. It was an arranged marriage. She had a 13-year-old daughter, my mother. My mother tells me my grandfather always wanted a family. This marriage gave him a family and offered my mother more opportunities for an education than the small farming and fishing town she grew up in could. On the coast of Wakayama, the same town my grandfather left when he was 15. After they married in Japan, my grandmother left with my grandfather for Los Angeles. My mother arrived later, traversing the Pacific alone, at roughly the same age my grandfather was when he crossed. 3. My grandfather was a smoker. He died after 3 years of battling emphysema. 4. As a child during the weekends, we visited my grandparents' house. It took 22 minutes on the 10 freeway from the suburbs in San Gabriel to Koreatown in Los Angeles, the way my father drove, with a precision that caused motion sickness and a curiosity to use my digital wristwatch to time him. On the way, we always stopped at a liquor store to buy a carton of Marlboros. The red, slender carton held 20 packs. 20 packs equals 200 cigarettes. It was only a matter of time that it all caught up to my grandfather, but the smoke was part of his essence. The right combination of burnt tobacco and wool still brings me back to him. 5. In my memories, my grandfather is sitting in the house in a massage chair. My parents got him for his birthday. He clicks the power on, and 2 pegs at his shoulders rotate in small circles, kneading his muscles and then changing to a drumming motion, an even beat moving up and down his back. He sits watching baseball games, rooting for his team, the Dodgers, always a cigarette in hand, the carpet surrounding the chair collecting a pattern of singed black polka dots. 6. When I was 7, my grandfather was hospitalized for his emphysema. The weekends were now reserved for visits with him at the hospital. The smell of sickness filled the halls, sterile yet distinctly of bodies deteriorating. My grandfather had to have a tracheostomy, an incision in his throat for his ventilator. He lost the ability to speak, but he was still clever. He wrote on a notepad to communicate with us and the doctors and nurses. When he wanted to complain to us about his nurses, he wrote in Japanese. 7. My grandfather died in October of 1986 and was cremated. He asked for half of his ashes to be buried in Los Angeles, his home of over 70 years, and the other half was to be buried in Wakayama, in the family plot of his ancestors. It made perfect sense to me that he had two homes and that he wished for his body to be divided between them in his afterlife. 8. The summer before my grandfather died, The Karate Kid Part 2 came out. I was 10 years old and in love with Ralph Macchio. I mean, come on. My mother promised my sister and I that we could see the movie after visiting my grandfather in the hospital. In The Karate Kid Part 2, Daniel goes to Okinawa with Mr. Miyagi. Daniel falls in love with a beautiful young woman played by Tamlin Tomita. 2 years earlier, I watched as Tamlin Tomita was crowned queen at the annual Nisei Week Festival in Little Tokyo, a festival we attended as a family every year. Now she was in a movie kissing my love, Ralph Macchio. 9. That movie was the first time I saw someone like me from my community in a lead romantic role with a white boy. Acceptance, bright and large on a screen in a dark theater, while my grandfather, a man who showed me acceptance through community, was taking his last breaths. 10. My grandfather was a photographer in the 1930s in Los Angeles. This year, his photography was included in an exhibit called Making Waves, Japanese American Photography, 1920 to 1940. Photographs that hung in my childhood home were now on the walls of the Japanese American National Museum, so close to the places he roamed to take these images. A book of the show includes the history behind this group of photographers, friends and collaborators, creating art, expressing their heritage as Japanese Americans. 11. A camera converts an image into a photograph the same way our eyes see the world. Light filters into a camera, and an inverted image is reversed by the lens. When we see the world, our brains flip the images right side up. It's all about how much light you let in. 12. In Making Waves, the curator states, Japanese American photographers might have chosen to abandon their heritage in favor of strictly Western photographic subjects and methods, but on the whole, they did not. They elected, as much out of instinct as conscious decision, to produce works that honored their heritage. This did not, however, mean that they were not able to embrace new ideas as well. 13. In the back of the book is a biography of my grandfather. I learned that he first exhibited as a member of the Japanese Camera Pictorialists of California. Oof, that was long. Japanese Camera Pictorialists of California in 1928. His photographs were shown in salons in London and Paris. He owned his own portrait studio on West 6th Street in San Pedro. He worked as a shoe salesman, a gardener, and opened a cafe after his vision deteriorated and he was forced to close the studio. 14. My grandfather was a husband. He married 3 times. His first wife was 6 years younger than him. She was 17 when she died in childbirth. Their baby boy survived and my grandfather married again, but his son died just 4 days after his first birthday. 15. During World War II, my grandfather and his second wife were sent to an internment camp in Heart Mountain, Wyoming, far from their home in Los Angeles. I was too young when he was alive to ask how that affected him, but when he did speak about the experience, he recalled the cold. So cold that his mustache would freeze, so cold that his glasses would fog up. There's a photograph of them I found while Googling his name. The caption is haunting. Photograph of Ichido and Fusui Itani posing outside of their family barrack, 91F, Heart Mountain Relocation Center, Wyoming. They are standing between a couple of shrubs growing outside their barrack. Something about the words barrack and couple of shrubs growing sets the tone for what it must have been like living there for 3 years. In 1955, 10 years after they were released from the camps, his second wife died of cancer. 16. My grandfather was a magician. He learned card tricks when he was in the internment camps. Later, he kept a loud pigeon in the basement that he trained for his act. He joined a club for magicians in Los Angeles. I don't remember him showing me magic tricks as a child, but maybe I just didn't see them. 17. There's a photograph, a Polaroid taken by my older sister's first camera. The Polaroid stayed on my grandmother's dresser throughout my childhood. My grandfather is sitting in a chair outside of his house in front of the garage. Beside him is a large shelf holding his bonsai trees. The camellia tree on the other side of him is blooming pink blooms. My sister is to his left, and I am sitting on his right thigh. My sister and I smile, full, silly girl smiles. My grandfather is wearing his Dodgers cap, thick glasses enlarging his eyes to a cartoonish size, and a blue windbreaker with a Terminal Islanders patch. 18. In my memories, he is always wearing that jacket like a uniform. I always thought it was just his favorite jacket, and maybe it was, but I now know what the patch means. The Terminal Islanders Club memorialized a fishing village in San Pedro, where 3,000 first and second generation Japanese made their homes in the 1940s, many working in the fishing industry. They were the first to be sent to internment camps during World War II. 19. Every summer, we joined the club's annual picnics. It was the most Japanese thing we did all year. We played traditional games like seeing who can grab an onpun bun hanging off of a string the fastest with just their mouth and their hands behind their backs. We sang old Enka songs, shared onigiri and buckets of KFC, and space and tatami mats for friends and family. All these villagers coming together and celebrating being Japanese Americans. A lot of them from the same hometowns in Japan, and most related somehow by blood or marriage. The jacket has somehow made its way into my closet. 20. My grandfather was stoned for most of my life. When we visited his grave on holidays as a family, we brought a bucket, towels, shears, and flowers. We trimmed the grass around the grave marker, poured water onto it gently, and wiped down the letters engraved. Eri Ichiro Itani, March 26, 1903, October 19, 1986. I would talk to my grandfather, brush the dirt and water off with a small cloth, like washing a cold, worn face. 21. My grandfather was a man who saw the beauty in an eel fisherman, a man who waited hours on a bridge overhead, watching to catch the moment a fisherman walked through the low tide, leaving behind ripples, perfect circles, each one larger and larger, further and further away from the subject, turning simple movements into art, into a story. 22. This story, if this is a story, may never have an ending. There's something I'm searching for through my grandfather, through our bond, and it's under all of this water. The story is something about being two or more things at once. It's about being Japanese American. It's about loss and emptiness and reinvention and filling empty spaces with art, with love. I'm filling the spaces one word at a time. Thank you.